My sister looked me dead in the eye at Christmas dinner and said, "You always have to make everything about money, don't you?" This after I had quietly paid off the $23,000 line of credit our parents had taken out to fund her photography business. That was the moment something in me stopped. Not broke. Stopped. Let me back up, because this story doesn't start at Christmas. It starts 7 years ago, in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in Kitchener, Ontario, when I was 26 years old, eating grocery store sushi at 11:30 at night because I had missed dinner again. I was doing my CPA articling hours at a mid-sized accounting firm, surviving on Tim Hortons and sheer stubbornness. I had student debt, a mattress on the floor, and a very clear plan for my life. My sister, who was 22 at the time, was in our childhood bedroom, back in our parents' house in Brampton, deciding whether she wanted to be a photographer or a ceramics artist or possibly a travel blogger. She hadn't decided yet. She needed time. She needed space. She needed, according to my mother, support. I was the older one, the practical one, the one who had always figured it out. I passed my CFE on the first attempt. I got a job at a larger firm in Toronto. I moved into a real apartment with actual furniture I had chosen and paid for myself. My then boyfriend, who I'll just call my partner, was an engineer, steady and patient and endlessly supportive of the chaos that came with loving someone who came from my family. We had a plan, a down payment, a timeline. We were careful, we were deliberate. I was proud of what we were building. My parents were not bad people. I want to be clear about that, because this story has a villain and it isn't entirely them. My father had retired early from a 20-year career with Canada Post. My mother had worked part-time at a dental office until her knees got bad. They had a decent pension coming in between the two of them. The house in Brampton was paid off, and they lived simply. They were not struggling. But they had one great weakness, and her name was my sister. My sister had always been the one who needed more. More patience, more understanding, more financial runway to find herself. My parents talked about her sensitivity, the way other people talk about a medical condition. She needed careful handling. She couldn't be pushed. I had pushed myself, obviously, because I was different, because I could handle it. The implication being that needing nothing made me somehow less interesting to worry about. When my sister decided, at 24, that she wanted to launch a photography business, my parents were thrilled. When she explained that she needed a mirrorless camera, a laptop, editing software, and a course in Vancouver that cost $4,000, my parents said yes, without blinking. When the business didn't really materialize and the Vancouver course turned into a 3-week trip to Portugal with a friend, nobody mentioned it. When she needed a new lens the following spring, and then a website designer, and then a studio rental, my parents opened their line of credit. I didn't know about the line of credit. Not at first. The first time I found out my family had financial problems was a Tuesday afternoon in March, 3 years after I had made CPA. My mother called me while I was in the middle of reviewing a client's year-end file. She never called during work hours. I knew before I picked up that something was wrong. "Your father needs a root canal," she said, "and the dental plan only covers 60%. It was $420. I paid it. I told myself it was a one-time thing. It wasn't. Over the next 2 years, I became the family's emergency fund. A car repair in November. Property taxes in April when they had a shortfall. Prescriptions for my father in the winter when his drug plan had a gap. Each time my mother called with the same embarrassed, slightly entitled tone, as though she was asking me to lend her a pen rather than $500. Each time, I paid. Each time I told myself it was fine, it was family, it wasn't that much. My partner noticed before I did. He's quiet about things like that. He doesn't argue, he observes. One evening he sat down next to me on the couch with his coffee and said, very gently, "Do you know how much you've sent your parents this year?" I didn't know. I added it up. It was over $9,000. I remember staring at that number on my phone's calculator app for a long moment. $9,000 that had not come with a single question about how I was doing. $9,000 given across 17 separate transfers over 10 months. Not one of them had been asked about at Christmas. Not one had come up when my mother spent 45 minutes on the phone telling me about my sister's new client in Milton who had hired her for newborn photos. I should have said something then. I know that. I should have had the conversation, set the expectation, drawn the line. But I didn't, because I had been trained since childhood to believe that needing things was a burden, and providing them was just what I did. The line of credit came to light 6 months later. My sister let it slip at my parents' anniversary dinner the way she let most things slip, casually and without apparent awareness that it might matter. She was talking about her new camera bag and mentioned, almost as an aside, that our parents had helped her get started with financing. My mother changed the subject immediately. My father looked at the tablecloth. My sister kept talking about the camera bag. I went home that night and asked my mother directly by text because I knew she would be more honest in writing than on the phone. She confirmed it. $23,000 on a home equity line of credit, opened 2 years earlier, taken out almost entirely to fund my sister's business attempts, and, it turned out, one significant top-up to my sister's rent account when she moved into a condo in Hamilton she couldn't quite afford on her own. I paid off the line of credit. I don't know exactly why I did it. Some combination of love and fear, and the deep structural belief that the family only stayed standing if I held it up. I transferred the money, closed the line of credit myself by calling the bank, and said nothing to my sister about it. My mother cried and called me her rock. My father said he didn't know what they would do without me. My sister sent me a voice note saying, "Aw, that's so sweet of you," as though I had covered the bill at brunch. The Christmas dinner where she told me I made everything about money was 4 months after that transfer. We had been at my parents' house since noon. I had driven in from Toronto with a car full of gifts, wine, and the standing rib roast my mother liked because she didn't want to make it herself. My partner had taken 2 days off work to be there. My sister had arrived at 2:30 with her boyfriend, who she had been dating for 6 weeks and introduced as probably the one, and an artisanal gift basket from a shop on Locke Street that I happened to know cost $35 and had been purchased with the credit card my parents still quietly covered. Dinner was fine until my father made a comment about hoping my partner and I would think about buying a house soon, given the market. I mentioned lightly that we had been saving carefully, but that unexpected expenses had slowed our timeline a little. It was not a pointed comment. I was not looking at anyone. I was cutting my roast. My sister put down her fork. "You always have to make everything about money, don't you?" The table went quiet. My mother looked at her plate. My partner's jaw tightened. I looked at my sister, this woman I had subsidized for years, sitting across from me in a cashmere sweater that I strongly suspected had been a birthday gift from our parents, funded by the emergency transfers I had made throughout the year, and I felt something I had never quite felt before. Not anger. Clarity. "You're right," I said. "I'll stop bringing it up." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't enumerate the transfers. I didn't mention the line of credit. I just smiled and went back to my roast. My partner looked at me carefully, and I gave him the smallest nod and he understood. On the drive home that night, I told him everything I had been half telling him for years. The full number. The actual total which I calculated on my phone while he drove. Over 4 years, including the line of credit payoff, I had given or transferred to my family a total of just over $41,000. $41,000, most of which had gone, in one form or another, toward a life my sister was living while calling me selfish for caring about money. My partner said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I need to think." I thought for 2 weeks. I pulled every bank statement. I documented every transfer. I looked at our own timeline, what we had originally planned versus where we actually were. We should have been in a house by then. We had been careful enough, disciplined enough. The gap between where we were and where we should have been was almost exactly $41,000. The first thing I did was call my bank and remove my parents from my emergency contact on my profile. A small thing, but it felt important. The second thing I did was meet with a financial planner, some outside my firm, to set up what I called a personal protection structure. I documented everything going out. I started paying myself first in a very deliberate and protected way. I set up a separate account that my family had no knowledge of, where our actual house savings would live from this point forward. The third thing I did was wait for the next call. It came in February. My mother, her voice carrying that familiar mix of apology and expectation. My sister needed first and last for a new apartment because her current landlord was selling the building and she had to move by April 1st. It was $8,000. My mother said she and my father didn't have it liquid right now, but they would pay me back. I said, "I can't help with that, Mom." The silence was very long. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not in a position to help with that right now. I'm sorry. But she has nowhere to go. She'll have to move back here. That might be what needs to happen," I said. My mother's voice shifted. The apologetic tone evaporated. "I don't understand you sometimes, honestly. You make good money. You and your partner don't have kids. You don't have a mortgage. Your sister is struggling." There it was. The accounting of my life as it was useful to them. I make good money. I don't have a mortgage. Not, I spent $41,000. Not, where do you think the down payment went? "I love you, Mom," I said. "But I can't help with this." I hung up. My sister called within the hour. She didn't open with hello. She said, "Are you serious right now?" "I am," I said. "You paid off their line of credit and you can't help me with $8,000 for rent? Do you know how selfish that is?" She knew about the line of credit. Of course she knew. She had probably known about every transfer. They were a team, the three of them, and I was the funding source. "I paid off the line of credit," I said quietly, "because the line of credit was used for you. I'm now choosing to stop doing that." "You're punishing me because I said something at Christmas?" "I'm making a financial decision," I said. "Which, as you pointed out at Christmas, is something I do." She hung up on me. The next call from my parents came 3 days later. My father this time. He was calmer than my mother, more measured. But the message was the same. They were worried about my sister. The new apartment search was not going well. She might genuinely have to move back into their house and they weren't set up for it. "She's 30 years old, Dad," I said. "You know she has a hard time with these kinds of pressures." "I had a hard time at 32, I said. "I had student debt and a mattress on the floor." "That's different, sweetheart. You've always been capable." I had been hearing some version of that sentence my whole life. "You're capable, so you don't need. You're strong, so you can carry more. You're fine, so we don't have to check." Being competent had cost me, over 4 years, $41,000 and a 2-year delay on my own life. "Dad," I said, "I need you to hear me. I am not going to help with my sister's rent. If she needs to move home, she can move home. But I am not the solution to this." He said I was being cold. He said I had changed. He said he hoped I would think about what kind of person I wanted to be. I said, "I've thought about it a lot, actually." The following week, I did something I had been putting off for a long time. I sat down with my partner and we looked, clearly and without flinching, at what the last 4 years had actually cost us. Not just financially, though that was significant. We were roughly 18 months behind where we would have been on our house savings. But also the decisions we hadn't made, the trip we hadn't taken, the months I had spent managing their financial emergencies instead of building our own future. I felt something shift in me, looking at those numbers. Not grief exactly, something more like resolution. I drafted a letter. I didn't send it immediately. I let it sit for 4 days, revised it twice, had my partner read it. It wasn't a list of grievances, as it was clear and short. It said that I loved them, that I wanted to maintain a relationship with them, but that I would no longer be available as financial support for the family. I listed, because I am an accountant and this is how I communicate, the total amount I had transferred over 4 years. I said I was not asking for repayment, I was asking for acknowledgement. and I was drawing a clear line going forward. I sent it by email. I know some people do these things in person. I chose email because I needed them to have the words in front of them, uninterrupted, without being able to talk over me. My mother called 4 times that afternoon. I let them go to voicemail. The first message was hurt and confused. The second was defensive. The third had crying. The fourth was the one that mattered, the one I had been waiting for, because in the fourth message her voice finally went quiet and she said, "I didn't realize it was that much. I genuinely didn't realize." I believed her a little. I thought she had probably not added it up. That was the thing about enabling. It happened in small increments, each one reasonable on its own, until you looked at the whole, and it was $41,000. My father came to the conclusion more slowly. He was a methodical man. 2 days after the email, he sent me a text. Just one line. "I owe you more than money. I'll call when I'm ready to talk properly." He called the following Sunday. It was the most honest conversation I had ever had with him. He was not defensive. He didn't make excuses for my sister. He said that they had let me carry weight that was never mine to carry, and that they had let it happen, partly because it was easier than managing my sister's disappointment, and partly, he admitted, because I had always just handled things, and they had stopped asking if I was okay with it. "I stopped asking you years ago," he said. "That was wrong," I cried. Not at the apology exactly. At the plain, factual truth of what he had said. I had stopped being asked. I had started being assumed. My sister's arc was less graceful. She moved back into my parents' house in April, which she announced to the family group chat, with a long message about how some people choose family and some people choose money. She tagged me. I left the group chat. She sent me a follow-up message calling me a financial abuser, which was genuinely impressive in its inversion of reality, and which I screenshotted and filed, partly as documentation and partly because sometimes you need to look at something to remember you're not imagining it. What happened next, over the following months, was less dramatic than I had expected and more meaningful. My sister, forced for the first time to live without a silent financial backstop, did something I genuinely hadn't predicted. She got serious about work. Not overnight, not without complaint. My mother gave me updates cautiously, as though I might disapprove. My sister had picked up 3 regular clients. She was shooting real estate listings on the side. She was making actual money. I didn't feel triumphant about that. I felt something more complicated, like watching someone discover they could swim after years of being carried. My mother and I found a new rhythm. She calls on Sundays now. She doesn't ask for things. We talk about ordinary things. She asked me in September how the house hunt was going. We had made an offer by then. We were close. She said she was glad. She didn't say she was sorry, not directly. But she asked, and that was something. My partner and I got the keys in November. It's a semi-detached in Hamilton, because that's what made sense for us, not the Instagram version of the life I had been quietly deferring. The night we got the keys, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor of the empty living room, and my partner raised his beer can and said, "You did this." And I shook my head because we did it together, but I understood what he meant. I had stopped being a utility and started being a person again. Not just to them, to myself. My sister texted me in December. Not about money. She said she was going to a friend's for Christmas this year and she didn't want things to be weird between us. She asked if we could get coffee in the new year. I didn't reply right away. I thought about it for 3 days, which is probably more thought than a coffee invitation requires. But it felt like the first question she had ever asked me that wasn't underwritten by something she needed. I texted back, "Yes, January works." It wasn't forgiveness. I'm not sure what it was. But I had spent 4 years making myself smaller so that her life could be larger, and I was done with that, and maybe she was starting to understand that too. Maybe the version of us that could exist on the other side of all of it was something worth finding out. Or maybe it would be a difficult coffee and nothing would change, and I would leave knowing I had tried. Either way, I would leave. I would get in my car, drive back to my house, the one I bought, and make dinner in my kitchen, and that would be enough. That would be more than enough.